Okay, so I was gung-ho on doing this solar heater in this manner and making the box around it and everything, except that I got this far and realized that I really suck at trying to keep things measured properly and trying to follow someone else's plans. The guy's video on YouTube is amazing. He does a wonderful job, but I am terrible at following directions and I don't like to measure. So I'm sitting here with this project half done, and my husband said that I have to hurry up and clean out his garage. So I've got to hurry up and get this done, but I'm dead set that we need to have the solar heaters because over there are all of our plants and there is a space heater going. So I'm walking around the Dollar General and I'm like, now how can I do this in the easiest, laziest way possible, but still not spend a bunch of money, because not only am I lazy, but I'm also pretty cheap. So I happen upon these. These are your usual $2 coolers from the dollar store. They're a nice heavy styrofoam. They beat the cheap garage door foam that I was trying to use to finish this guy off. So I'm going to use these. Now when I was measuring, I was hoping that one cooler would do it, but one cooler is not long enough. I'll show you. One cooler is not long enough for one line of cans. And you see the line of cans, of course, is longer than that. And I don't really want a smaller line of cans because you want them as long as possible to allow for the air to warm up. You know, and if you have a short can, it doesn't work like it does if you have a long can. The longer the can, the more the heat, the higher the vacuum, that kind of thing. So I went ahead and got two, and we're going to get these two put together in the cheap, lazy person's way to make a solar can heater. First thing you'll notice is that these coolers have an angle to them. They're tapered down to the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to square that off on both sides so that we can stick two of those coolers. Now, one of the many things that I've learned along with this project is that cutting styrofoam is a bitch. And so the easiest thing you can do to cut styrofoam is just to go get a serrated steak knife. This works better than X-Acto knives, fancy schmancy tools, things that melt and burn, whatever. Just use a serrated steak knife. You want to keep your edge as close to straight as possible because you're going to want to butt those suckers. Now, I went ahead and I just used this mold line, this blow mold line, as my straight edge to use as a reference. And let me get here, I'll show you how easy it is. Much easier with the serrated knife. It leaves you with a nice, much cleaner edge than if you try to use an X-Acto. Okay, so you're going to want to have these edges fit together as close as possible. If you end up with a little of the weird corner, maybe trim it down, just so that they can butt up against each other real well. And then what we're going to do, because you want this as airtight as possible, is we're going to use the silicone caulk, just like you use on the cans. And I'm going to come right here. Now I cut my caulk nice and wide to give myself a huge bead, because this little thin bead stuff isn't cutting it. Plus the end of mine dried up because, like I said, I'm lazy. And it's taking me a while. My husband wants his garage back, so we're going to get this done. You want to lay this bead as thick as possible. And I like to think of this like the same as when you're doing icing and you're putting layers of cake together. That cake isn't going to stick if you just have a little wimpy little bit of icing in there. You need a lot of goo, a lot of mortar to make that stick. So, you know, we want to make sure we have a lot of good silicone caulk going on in there. All right. Now, this is the tricky part, and I need two hands for it, but I will give you the idea. You're going to set one cooler piece on top of the other cooler piece. Keep it nice and even, because you want this to seal up, a nice tight, airtight seal, because this is going to be your heat chamber and you want it nice and sealed. You have to excuse me, I do these videos on my own. I don't have anybody holding the camera for me, so it's a little wiggly. But you got the outside there. Now, because duct tape is what makes the world go round, we're going to seal off the outside of that with duct tape. So here we have our cooler boxes. They're all stuck together. Man, that was a shit ton easier than having to build a box out of this cheap, flimsy styrofoam. This is heavier. It's built to last for beverages and cans, at least, you know, through an event, you know, that kind of thing. So much heavier duty. And we've got it sealed up with silicone, and we've got duct tape all around it because duct tape runs the world. It's got a light side. It's like the Force. It's got a light side and dark side, and it holds the world together, holds the universe together. So now what we have to do is we have to line the inside of this sucker with foil. Now, like I said before, I am a cheap person, but this is where I do not cheap out. I like to use Gorilla Glue, whether it's the wood glue, that gel glue. I really like Gorilla brand stuff. We don't want this foil to come off. We don't want the sun to be beating into this box and the foil to suddenly peel off of there because you used Elmer's or cheap ass paste. So we're going to use Gorilla Glue because it's worth it. The part where I thought it would be okay to cheap out a little bit, I went ahead and got the 49-cent aluminum foil. It's not the quality of the foil that matters so much as the fact that you do have aluminum foil in there, because aluminum foil helps generate heat, hence the reason why we use aluminum cans. They heat up quick. But another reason is because you cannot spray paint styrofoam. If you try to use regular Rust-Oleum or a can of 99-cent spray paint on the inside of this cooler box to spray paint it black, which is what you want to absorb the heat, you will melt the styrofoam. So the main thing is that you have this metal lining inside this box, okay? Because aluminum is cheap, easy, and it conducts heat. And it will hold spray paint without allowing your styrofoam to be eaten and dissolved. So we want to smash it in here. Another nice feature of aluminum foil, it does not have to be perfectly smooth. Smooth-ish is fine. Obviously, since I'm using a taper bottom cooler, I'm not going to get a nice flat piece. And once again, to reiterate the lazy point, I'm not going to sit here and measure this and cut out all this foil to fit. I'm going to smash this stuff in there and make it work as best as possible. So I'll be right. Okay, so do not skimp on the aluminum foil. Make sure you have all white on the inside of their cupboard. That's just a shine. Okay, that's not actually a hold of the foam. So, because the next step that you're going to do is spray paint. And we're going to paint the shit out of this aluminum foil. You want it to be as dark as possible in this box. So, you know, if it were a solar cooker or something like that, we would keep one piece of it silver, but it's not. We want to trap as much heat as possible inside this box. So we are going to spray paint all of it black. Make sure you're in a well-ventilated area, no huffing. And we want to get this as dark as possible. It may take extra coats because, as you see, aluminum foil will take the paint, but sometimes it gets runny and it leaves like bare spots, that kind of thing. So as many coats as it takes to spray paint this foil black. Now, meanwhile this is drying, I want to explain this. Now, these are a couple of pieces of the piping that they use to house electrical wires and stuff. And we had an extra few pieces sitting around from a gazebo that we kind of sort of rigged up to last one more year before it finally bit it in all of the wonderful Ohio winds. But, oh, it's got junk in it I gotta clean out. But I cut some pieces And these pieces are about 7-8 inches long. I've not seen any hard and fast rules on how long these need to be. What you're going to do is you have to create somewhere along the wall here, you have to create a cold air inlet and a hot air outlet. Now, like I said, I've not seen any hard and fast rules on how big these have to be, nor have I seen where they need to go. But, you know, just common sense tells me that cold air falls and heat rises. So whatever end that you have this on, you know, if you're going to have it sitting horizontally, perhaps you should have both of your holes like back here. One on the bottom, one on the top, or something of that nature. You know, something along that lines is what you want. So we have to put these in here, and in my mind it makes more sense to stick them in now so that we can caulk them in good and make sure everything has a nice hefty dose of black spray paint before we deal with putting in the can manifolds. So what I'm going to do, because I'm probably going to have these sitting vertically outside of our greenhouse, is I'm going to put one on the back, about here-ish for the hot air outlet, and then I'll have one down on the side, down here, for the cold air inlet. I went ahead and ran a generous bit of caulk all the way around these tubes. You want these tubes airtight, and you want them not able to move. And if that means that you have a big old blob of caulk holding it in there, then that's what that means. So another little tip on these coolers on the corners, they have these nice little round circles, just happen to be the same size as my conduit piping. So I just use that as my template to cut out the hole there. This one, it's not rocket science. I just held it up against the styrofoam and cut around it with the serrated steak knife. I know terribly technical tools here, but that's what I did. Now the thing is, you can't set this on the ground anymore. So I'm going to grab my trusty bucket here, which is an all-purpose tool for the handy woman who is lazy. And we're going to take this cooler and we're going to flip it over like this. And then I don't want that falling out, so I'm going to have to find something to prop that up with. Okay, so I've got this sitting here. You can see the pipe down on that end, and I smushed the foil around it. I added some caulk, a little spray paint over the top. I've got that one drying. I will have to put a little more black spray paint in there. And I had to use a box to prop that so that it dries in place. We're going to let this sit and dry for a few hours until that silicone does not move. And that's the important thing that we're going to do. And in the meantime, because now my can manifold can be a little longer, and like I said, the longer the distance on the cans, the more heat you get. Now, I thought about making it a can longer, but we're going to go ahead and stick with the 4 cans. So these are just root beer cans I took from my son's room because he drinks pop like it's going out of style. They do not have to be any certain kind of cans, just aluminum cans, and you pop out one end, and then the other end, holes or pop it out or something. And I have a little video that shows me prepping these for when I was going to use it on the other one. And I can show you how they go together, and that'll be the next thing. And then when this is all dry, we'll come out here and get the rest of it together. Oh, one good thing to do while you're while it is drying, if you haven't already, you want to get a measurement of the top of this, because you're going to need to get a piece of plexiglass. That's the most expensive part of this entire project, is the piece of plexiglass. Do not use glass. It will break, and I have kids and dogs and animals and neighbors, and I don't want any of them, you know, stepping on broken glass, that kind of thing. So I'm going to go get a piece of plastic plexiglass. Not super expensive, but plexiglass. Okay, so a nice side effect of using the cooler is that you're left with two of these ends. Okay? And you're thinking, what am I going to do with this? Well, one of the things that you have to do when you make this box is you have to build like a little partition to insulate the cold air side from the hot air side. So this styrofoam piece eliminates a lot of pain in the butt with measuring, etc., because it just fits. So I used the other end, and you know, it leaves a little lip here, so I just trimmed that off. And I made my... So you take that piece and you're going to want to cover it with foil. Now mine doesn't look too pretty. This is my preliminary piece, the first one I made. You cover it with foil, glue it on there as best as possible because you will be painting this black. And when you paint it black, what happens? The styrofoam melts. So we want to not have that happen. And then we're going to run a bead of silicone caulk all the way around there. It doesn't necessarily have to be tight with silicone, you know, sealed up tight. But running the silicone is a nice way to get it to stay put really fast. So we're going to go ahead and run that around there and stick that piece down in there tight so it stays. Okay, so I got my silicone around the outside. I am doing this by myself, so a little one-handed is a little hard, so I have to keep starting and stopping. You want to get this in there and just slide it down in so that it's tight, but you want it below the level where your plexiglass is going to sit, because the plexiglass has to be tight to the top of the cooler. So no weird bubbles in the middle is a good thing. And then we're going to have our cans here. You want as much light exposure as possible. Now in the previous design that I had first looked up, it was nice because the manifold laid flat. It was 5 rows of 4 cans all the way across. Now in this one, since that piece is tapered, I cut my holes with a little bit of a tapered design, you know, boom, 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 a little bit of a pyramid design. The one at the bottom, I can adjust a little bit and make sure it's in the center. Now, these cans are going to fall a little bit and be a real pain in the patookus. So what we're going to do, or what I'm going to do, is I'm going to put a little piece of cardboard underneath them, or a little chunk of styrofoam to kind of hold it up. Goodness knows I've got plenty of it from the one I didn't use before. And of course we have the other end and the lids that we can utilize to kind of get those pieces to stay up a little bit so that they get maximum sun exposure. Okay, so we're back. I just put a little piece of cardboard underneath, or a little piece of styrofoam underneath that bottom one, and kind of put a little caulk on it so it was gooey and it stayed down. So now you can see that when the sun is beating down, it's hitting all of those cans, at least somewhat, and it's heating up in that chamber. And we're going to put a little more black spray paint on them so that I know it's good and dark. We want to collect as much heat as possible in this bottom chamber. So we're just going to spray paint the daylights out of this. Okay, so we've got it all painted. The tubes are safely secured on there. For our cold air is over here, the cold air inlet. The air comes into this chamber. It's soaked up by those cans. And we're going to create a vacuum, if you will, where the hot is over here, the cold comes in over here. It's going to go in through those cans and sucked up through to the top end. That's kind of the reason for this partition here, is to make a cold or hot chamber and a cold chamber. And of course you want the cold chamber bigger because it's going to let in air, it's going to kind of circulate, and then hopefully what is going to happen is the majority of that air is going to eventually get sucked up into those cans and spit out here. The smaller hot air chamber then forces it out that hole so that we get a continuous cycle going round and round. And right now, I need to go get the piece of plexiglass that goes over the top. So meanwhile, that another layer of spray paint is drying. I measured it out. It ended up, I got to double check the length again. The width is about 13 inches. And the length is about 28.5. So if I got a 13 by 29 piece of plexiglass, I think that's going to take care of sealing up the unit so that we can get this thing going to generate some heat. Okay, so I went ahead and we got our plexiglass, and we've got a little extra foil here. I'm going to want to get this down into the box or cut it off or whatever you want to do. You just want to make sure that the caulk that we're going to put on the outside edges is going to seal up the plexiglass. So while we wanted these edges all covered and protected from the spray paint, we want the caulk to seal onto the plexiglass. So we want to make sure everything's in there nice and tight. And you'll see one of the reasons why I have my caulking gun cut so far back is because I want a nice wide strip of caulk all the way around. Okay, so I've got my caulking all the way around there, and yes, I applied it extra thick because I do have a couple little uneven spots, like where the coolers come together, that I want to make sure is sealed. Now, you'll get your plexiglass, and plexiglass has a film on it, and you want to make sure that you get that film off, but so that you have bare plexiglass to put it on, but you want to be sure that you don't take it off until you absolutely have to. I took it off the one side a little too soon, and it has a lot of static to it. So of course all the styrofoam little pellets are adhering to the glass. Now you want to put this on here, and when you squish it down and give it a little press, you see it sealing. And you want to make sure that you have it sealed. Everywhere there's styrofoam, you should have a seal going with the plexiglass. All the way around there. Now I'm going to go ahead and leave this extra stuff. Well, maybe not. I'm going to wipe off a little bit of it, of the extra. And I'm going to make sure that I have it here. Now because the coolers, you know, are not an exact square length or anything like that, I went ahead and just ordered just a hair bigger than what we need. See, I just want to double check all the way around here and make sure this is all sealed up nice and tight. Maybe scoot a little extra in there. Go right there. And we're going to put this on the floor. Well, I'm going to leave it on the bucket. And I'm going to put a couple of empty buckets on top to kind of just add a little bit of weight to seal this up so that it dries with a good seal on the plexiglass. Okay, so we've got it sitting there. We're going to let it dry overnight. And I've got the wood on there. See if I can get back to get the whole thing on there. Ignore my messy garage, which is why I've got to get these projects out of here. So we're going to let that go ahead and dry overnight while it's